right, so we are going to talk today about covering the event. That's going to be our focus today. And then we'll also talk about covering soccer and covering cross country. One reminder that I've sent out to everybody is all of your assignments are due by Sunday at midnight. That includes the blog for that week. That includes the assessment test for that week over the sports that we cover. And then if we have a writing assignment for that week, which you will have one for this week. All of that is due by midnight. Discussion board posts, those are due by midnight. Didn't get a whole lot of the assignments that were due this week, so I don't know if there's some confusion or what, but I'll send an email out with a reminder about everything that's due for the week. Got all your stuff. But need to make sure we're getting all of that in. We only have 6 weeks, and we've got to keep rolling through all this, okay? I know it's a lot, but it's just a 6-week class, so let's make sure we keep up with that, okay? All right. So, we're going to talk about covering the event. The first thing I want to go through, and this is up on Blackboard under the Week 2 folder. If you come up, go to the course PowerPoints and Lessons, Sports Writing Week 2. Right here on PowerPoint is some information. This is called, what I called Common Errors and Useful Tips, 7 common stylistic errors sports writers should avoid. So let's roll through those really quickly. Number 1, these are things that you should avoid, or they're tips that can make your writing more fresh and more exciting, okay? Number 1 is the one-sentence paragraph. They can be very dramatic. They can be very useful. So for example, your one-sentence paragraph would be, then things got interesting. 1 sentence, 1 paragraph, done. This we're talking about if you're writing for a magazine or for a newspaper or for online. Then your next paragraph, you would get into more details. Greinke found his rhythm and retired 14 batters in a row. The middle of the order figured out Pettit's game plan and started working counts. And just like that, the Royals battled back from a 9-0 deficit to take a 12-9 lead in the bottom of the 9th. So that first paragraph, or that first sentence, then things got interesting, that's a one-sentence paragraph to set up the next paragraph, okay? They can build some drama, but you also want to make sure you don't do them all the time. Why not? Why would you not want to use this all the time?
Because it can get boring.
It's going to get boring. I mean, the idea behind doing the one-sentence paragraph is to make it dramatic. Well, the more you do something, the less dramatic it becomes, so you just lost the effect. Okay, so don't do it a whole lot. Another one thing to avoid is the excessive example. Don't beat a dead horse. Teams playing poorly, just say they're playing poorly. You don't have to overdo it. Don't have to add a whole lot of hyperbole. It was a game only a mother could love. Turnovers reigned, sloppy play abounded. Both coaches looked on and never discussed. We get it, okay? It was a bad game. Don't keep pounding that. We got the point. Another one is the blind attribution. Don't make your story into a game of Trivial Pursuit. Okay, go ahead and give that information. If you talk about Randy Morrow, don't say later in the story the Warsaw native unless you've already established that he's coaching in Warsaw. Otherwise, what does Warsaw have to do with the story? Okay. Excessive adjective and adverb usage. I like to say that sports in and of themselves are exciting, they're dramatic. If you have to oversell it, probably wasn't a story worth writing anyway, okay? And in writing in general, in journalism, we really work hard to avoid a lot of adjectives and adverbs because they take up much more time, they take up more space. If we're talking about print, you only have so many column inches to write your story. And if you're going to use excessive words, you're taking up space. If we're talking about broadcast, you have only so much time. And if I have to say a lot of adjectives and adverbs, I'm wasting time. What's a better way of getting the point across, of making it more interesting? How else can you do that without a lot of adjectives and adverbs? Use more active verbs, more action verbs, okay? Instead of the adverbs and adjectives, because what do? They modify nouns, adjectives, adverbs. Or nouns, verbs, and adverbs, okay? That's the purpose of an adjective or adverb. But if you use a much more dynamic verb, you don't have to do that. So for example, avoid saying things like, he's sizzling 62% from three-point range. Okay, if you're writing sports, odds are the reader is a sports fan. They're going to know 62% three-point shooting is sizzling. You don't have to add the sizzling to it, okay? She's batting a robust 385. Softball fans already know 385 is a robust batting average. You don't have to add the robust. All right? Plus, you're getting a little biased in there. And as reporters, We keep our bias out. We just report the facts. So if you're talking about how sizzling it was and how robust it was, and you're throwing a lot of adjectives and adverbs in there, you're throwing your bias into the story as well. Let the reader decide, was that sizzling or was that robust? Also avoid the Q&A format unless you're writing it for a Q&A format column. For example, Dan Patrick has a section in Sports Illustrated where he does a Q&A with an athlete. Okay? It's designed to be a Q&A. That's perfectly fine, but that's a standard column. That's a weekly column that he does. For your story, we don't want to do Q&A. That's very lazy, because all you've done there is just say, okay, well, here's my question, here's their answer. Here's my question, here's their answer. We want you to be a storyteller. Make sense? Not an interview transcriber. Cliches. We've got to avoid cliches, and sports lend themselves to so many, so try and avoid those as best you can. And then one more, unfathomable numbers. So for example, if you say somebody shot 50% from three-point range, that sounds great. But if that player went 1 for 2, well, that's 50%. A big deal. I can hit 1 of 2. All right. Now, if they were 6 of 12, that's impressive. If they shot 12 three-pointers and they hit 6, they were 50%. That's impressive. So you're going to have to get some context. Okay. Make sure you include all that. Grammar tips for sports. This is important because they make you sound more intelligent. One of my pet peeves is when people will say the Mules lost 6-10. We want to say the Mules scored first because that's the team we're covering, right? But that's not how you give scores. You always give the winning score first. By saying the Mules lost 10-6, we know how many points the Mules scored. The Mules lost 10-6. 10 is greater than 6. Obviously, the Mules scored 6 points. Okay? So always, 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 leading score, winning score goes first. Also, another pet peeve of mine. Schools or city names are its. Mascots are that's. There is only one University of Central Missouri. Therefore, it's its. University of Central Missouri won its home opener. All right? Mules, there's plural. There's a lot of players on the team. The Mules won there. Does that make sense? Okay, that's one of my pet peeves. Drives me crazy. Visiting team is always listed first in the box scores and in scoreboard graphics, and on physical scoreboards they are as well. I said this except soccer because I was looking at the scoreboard out there and the home team is listed first, and that seemed a little odd to me, but apparently that's not the case. Apparently always the home team is listed first. Except like in baseball, you'll see the visiting teams on the top, home team on the bottom. That's how you get the top and bottom of the inning, right? Okay? But when we put our box score together, we always put the visiting team first and then the home team. Okay? You also need to pay attention to verbiage, and this is more for when we get into broadcasting. Pay attention to the verbiage. In baseball and softball, it's a 2-2 count, but the count is 2-2. Okay, so if you're broadcasting a game, you'll say the count is 2-2, or it's a 2-2 count. So you need to know the verbiage, you need to know the difference. 333 batting average is 333, not .333, not 33.3%. So if you see .333, you know that's a 333 batting average when you're saying it. Quarterback who completed 22 of 35 passes was 22 for 35, not 22 and 35. And you're sports fans, okay? I get you're taking a sports reporting class. Much of this you may hear and be like, well, duh, because you hear it all the time. But when you see it printed and you have to say it, that's when we get stuck, all right? You'd be surprised how many students I've had in either campus chatter or sports page who have been reading a script and they know sports, they know how to say it, but they see it printed out to say it and it throws them.
I was one of those people.
You did it a couple times, but we've had some that just every time really botch that. So it becomes habit because you get used to hearing it and you know how to say it, but can you read it and say it and think about it? Okay, so that's just things we got to be aware of. Basketball player hits 3 of 5 from beyond the arc, but he was 3 for 5 from three-point range. Okay, so those are some examples, but know that verbiage. And finally, again, sports, lots of numbers. We're going to have a lot of numbers to deal with. AP style when you write, they have specific ways you're supposed to write those numbers for consistency, for time constraints, for space constraints, so you need to be aware of those. Print, we always use numbers for 10 and above, always. If it's a number 10 and above, we're using the number. Anything 0 to 9, we spell out, except on certain occasions, all right? Contract worth $2,500,000, we're just gonna say $2.5 million. So if they sign a $2.5 million contract, we're gonna write it this way, not spell it all out, okay? If you do check your style book for numbers, there is an entire section dealing with sports in the AP style book, so you need to be aware of that. But for example, it's 4th down, and we spell out the 4th, but the ball is on the 4-yard line. So for yard lines, we use numbers, okay? So there are differences, you need to be aware of that. The bottom line is, I had a colleague that I worked with one time when I worked at the YMCA, and we had this really complex membership thing we had to go through with our computer and how we got people enrolled. And I said, what do? Do you have to memorize all of this? Because each membership type is different and it's all these different directions you have to go through. He said, the only thing you have to remember is, where did I keep the book? Okay? Where did I keep my style book? And there's numbers involved here. So I need to go back and check that style book before, so I'm using the numbers correctly. All right? Broadcast, we use the numbers for 12 through 999, and then we use combinations like 12,000, 18 million, $2.5 million, things like that. Okay? Numbers lower than 12 are always spelled out. Broadcast versus print, the reason we do 0 through 12 in broadcast is because in broadcast we're going to write out 11, because you see those 2 1s if you're reading off a teleprompter. Is that 2 1s or is that 2 L's? Well, that makes sense to write out 0 through 9, then spell out 0 through 9, then write the number 10, then spell out 11, and then use the numbers from then on. Okay. All right? Questions on that? I know there's only 2 of you in the classroom, but either of you have questions on that others that are going to be watching the video like that. Okay. These are the fine details, the little things that once you get these little things figured out, make it a lot easier to write, whether that's covering a story, whether it's covering an event, whether it's doing a feature, whatever it is that you're doing. Those little intricacies, those little fine details, make it a lot easier to write it. They give you a lot more credibility, and because, like, again, doing away with the adjectives and adverbs and using more active dynamic verbs, and we'll talk about that here a little more, that gives you more chance to be creative and say more because you're not wasting time. Okay? All right. On Blackboard, there are 2 PowerPoint presentations under covering the event. One is this writing game stories that I'm going to cover. The other is a quick and dirty. I think it's called Quick and Dirty Writing Tips. A lot of it I've just covered, and a lot of it is in this, so it's kind of a duplicate, so I'm not going to go through that PowerPoint. But this one, writing game stories. Good writing is going to come from solid reporting. I always say it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. Get the extra quote. Write the extra statistic. Ask the extra question. Do the extra amount of research to find the backstory. Do all of that to prepare yourself better, to get more information than you're going to need so that you can write the story. Okay? Only one time in my sports writing career did I run into a pinch where I had nothing else to give. I was covering a Warsaw High School football game when I worked for the Sedalia Democrat, and it was a very low-scoring game. Might have even been 10-6. There really wasn't a whole lot of scoring going on with it, and I focused a lot on the offense. I didn't get into the defense very much. I didn't really pay attention much to some great defensive plays that I could have thrown in. I didn't do enough of a job of keeping track of scoring drives or potential scoring drives that were thwarted. I didn't get enough interviews. I had 15 inches. My editor gave me 15 inches to cover in my story. I had 12. He's like, Joe, I gotta have 15. I said, I've already given you all the quotes I have. I've already given you the scoring plays, the details. There's nothing more I can give for this. And he said, and I was already back. I mean, I wasn't still down in Warsaw where I could have talked to him then. And this was long before the days of cell phones and the internet and all of that. He had to do a pull quote to fill the space, but that was a mistake I never made again, because that's embarrassing when you've got so much time or so much space to fill and you can't do it because you haven't done enough reporting. So always make sure you do that, okay? Double check your facts and your math. It'd be really embarrassing if you're doing your math and you're talking. I did this last year. I was writing up a script for the Midwest Missouri Gridiron Report when we did that, and I covered one of the running backs, and I ended up statting the football game. And I thought he'd had a great game. Well, when I did my math, it turned out it was a good game, not a great game. He only rushed for 80 yards. Well, I'd forgotten to carry a number. He actually had rushed for about 150 yards, but I messed up my math. So I went back, because I'm watching it, and I'm thinking, man, he's running all over the place. And then I did the math, and he only gained 80. I'm thinking, that just doesn't seem right. Double check the math. I only gained 150. He actually did have a great game, so I had to go back and fix that. Okay. One thing to keep in mind, fans today are really into more sophisticated stats. What do you guys think about all the dynamics and the advanced metrics they're using in baseball, like WAR and range score and all? Agree, disagree? What do you think?
I agree, but I think it's a lot. I think it's a lot to cover because baseball, you have to cover a lot of stuff as it is.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think of it?
I feel like for the people who are like really passionate about it, they can get really into like all the stats because that's a whole different side to all the sports. Like that's a whole different category to them overall. Just all the WAR and the I don't know, just all of them.
Yeah.
Just RBI.
I mean, the only ones that are sticking out of my head right now are WAR, wins against replacement, which. How do you figure that? You know, if I'm center fielder, if I'm Lorenzo Cain, what is my WAR? You know, so if they put in Billy Burns, for example, who they just brought up, and he goes in center field instead of Lorenzo Cain, they're figuring out his batting, they're figuring out his RBI production, they're figuring out how many runs he scores, they're figuring out his range, how much ground he covers. You know, they're now looking at. I was reading yesterday. They were talking about Jorge Soler. For the Royals, who they just sent back down, and they were talking. There was some statistic that they had in there that was abbreviated. I had no clue what they were talking about. But then they got to talking about his percentage of hard hit balls. Well, who determined what is a hard hit ball? And I know it's a miles per hour off the bat, and you know how many walks he had plus. It was hard hit balls, walks. And there was one other thing. They were figuring out this statistic, and I thought, really. And really getting, so I guess I'm not that sophisticated as a sports fan, I guess is the point I'm trying to make. But understand that you have some fans who are, and so you're going to have to think about stats beyond their batting average and their home runs and their RBI. Now we look a lot at their batting average and their on-base percentage and their slugging percentage, and then we look at the total batting line. Okay. Soccer, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, you're not going to have a lot of advanced stats. There's not a whole lot of stats to talk about. Football, you're going to get their yards per carry at home versus on the road, on a turf versus grass. So you're going to get some of those things, but just be aware that that's out there. Okay. You need to know a lot more about trends, why they're winning and losing. So pay attention to that. That's some of the research you should be doing. How many games in a row they won versus this division, or how many games they won at home, or things of that nature. What's coming next? Who do they have coming up after this? Are they about to go on a streak? So, you know, you're talking football, for example. Somebody said, was telling me yesterday, this week at Scott Hoffsummer, we were doing the center stage dance recital, and we were at an intermission, and he was on his phone looking, and he said that the Chiefs are being rated as the Patriots' easiest game of the year. He goes, and this is a team that's playing the New York Jets. Scott's a diehard Chiefs fan. Scott was very offended. Okay. But you talk about a stretch of games where they're playing 2016 playoff teams, but then they go on a stretch of 8 games after this. So if they can get through these first 4 games, they've got 8 pretty easy games after that. So if they could go 2-2 here and have these 8 games, and they go 6-2 in those games. All right, well, they're off to an 8-4 start. We've got a good chance of making it, all right? But you have to think about that so you can lay it out for your reader or for your viewer. Understand what the loss or victory means, and then think about any kind of a unique angle, something that, you know, how have they been doing at home, how have they been doing in good weather, how have they done against teams with a winning record, those types of things. Any bit of information that you can come up with that you can add into your story. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to. but that you haven't, that you've done that kind of a research. Because if it becomes critical within the game, you just never know. If it becomes critical within the game that they've now lost 3 in a row to sub 500 teams, and they've got a tough stretch coming up, this is not boding well, okay? Or if their defense has, they've committed so many errors in the past 4 games, but in this game they were error-free against one of the best teams in baseball. Have they turned a corner? Have they figured out what was going wrong? So look for that type of information. Things to consider. You want to have a quality lead. What is the lead? Should have writing across the media by this point. What is the lead of a news story?
Isn't lead the information that tries to get the audience's attention?
It's that first sentence that's trying to get the audience's attention. Exactly right. It's going to answer the major questions. What are the 5 major questions we ask in journalism?
Who, what, when, where, and how?
Who, what, when, where, why, how.
Okay.
Can get mixed in there. Yeah, the 5 W's and the H we call it. Okay, so your lead, and you're not necessarily going to answer all of that, but the important ones of it, that's part of your news judgment. Part of your training as a journalist is what are the most critical of those questions and where do I answer them? They should all 5 be answered, all 6 if they're on the how. Within the first couple of paragraphs. But your lead is where you're grabbing their attention, you're telling the main part of the story, and then you're building it from there. Okay? You might want to think about addressing field conditions. Again, if it's a day like today, not critical. If it's just your typical summer day for a baseball game, field conditions don't really matter. Think about the organization and how you're going to organize this story. Are you going to focus on one individual performance and then how the game fits within that? Are you going to focus on the rivalry between these 2 teams? You think about a couple of weeks ago when Washington and, was it Washington and San Francisco? When Bryce Harper and, I can't remember the pitcher's name. When they got in. Strickland. Whoever.
It was Strickland, thanks.
When they got into the big fight, is that going to be the big story? Or is that just going to be a sidebar? You need to decide. Again, that's your news judgment. Your context and analysis. What does this game mean in the grand scheme of things? Pointing out some of the key plays. Think about statistics and which ones are the important ones to use. What kind of quotes do you have? Think about the language of the sport. And then the type of story that you're going to be writing. Okay. So is it a hard news story? Is it a feature or what? All right? Okay, so we're going to drill down into each of these and talk a little bit more. Quality lead. It's not necessarily going to be the winner or the loser. It may be that, so for example, the Super Bowl this past year, Peyton Manning playing in his last game. Is the lead going to be who won the game, or is the lead going to be that Peyton Manning's playing in his last game? If the Broncos had lost, then, I say this last year, it was 2 years ago, then is Peyton still the lead to the game? Well, he may have had a super game in his last game, but it wasn't enough, all right? Or the fact that it was his last game, he didn't play particularly well, but the defense was fantastic. That may be the lead. Yeah.
Can reporters choose more than one headline to be the league, or do they have to?
First of all, reporters don't write the headlines. The editors write the headlines, so they'll pick that out from the story. But as far as the lead goes, no, you're only going to have one lead. All right. Now you may hit something in the second paragraph. So your lead for that Super Bowl may have been something like it was Peyton Manning's last game, but Peyton wasn't the story here. The Broncos defense sent their captain off with a victory.
Led by Von Miller. You could also put that somewhere.
Well, you probably put that a little bit later in. Okay.
Yeah.
But your lead may not be who won the game, which team won the game. So you're trying to think about what is the most compelling story to this story as we build it out. All right. Do address field conditions if they had an impact. If we're talking cross country and it was I talked to our cross country coach one time. I was in Missouri Southern. They canceled a cross country meet because it was too hot. And I was like, really? Because you're wearing, they call you thin clads for a reason, because you wear very short running shorts and really thin tank tops. you never see a football game or a soccer match called because of heat. And my cross-country coach said, yes, but in football you play about 11 seconds and then you stop. And then you play another 11 seconds and then you stop. And then if you're an offensive player when the defense is on the field, you're on the sidelines catching a break. In a typical football game, a player only plays maybe 12 minutes. I've learned that last year, because if you add all the time up that they're actually playing the game, about 12 minutes of action in a 60-minute game. That was unbelievable to me when I caught that. And he said in the soccer match, you notice they're not running the whole time. If the ball's away, they may be standing on the other side. They're on the weak side, ball's on the far side of the field, they're standing. Cross country, you are running the entire time for however many miles this race is, over rough terrain. So a 100-degree day is brutal. You have guys falling out left and right. That's why when they get to the cross-country nationals and regionals and it's in cold temperatures, they're like, yes, because your body's going to heat up anyway for the event. But the field event, or the field conditions, play a factor there. If you've got a passing football team, they run a spread offense and they're playing on grass and it has been pouring for 3 days, what's it going to do to that field? That's going to make a difference. So think about the field conditions. Again, if they are going to have an impact. In golf, if you've got high winds, that is going to have an impact. If they don't, you don't worry about it. But if they do, you need to address it. Okay, context and analysis. Again, they want to know, what does it mean to the standings? Your fans want to know, is a win going to be a new record for a coach? They want to know, are players about to break individual records? Is this going to be their last game? Could this be their last game before they're traded? I thought they did a really nice job when the Royals and the Giants played in the World Series. We're going to leave out everything about Madison Bumgarner, but I thought they did a really nice job at one point of talking about several of the Giants players, because the Giants have been on an unbelievable run, right, as a team. For the past how many years, they were like in the World Series every other year. But some of their key players were up for free agency. And what did this mean? Was this their last chance? Was this going to be the end of that Giants dynasty because several of their players were leaving? That was a story I thought they should have built more. Madison Bumgarner, what he did was phenomenal. But you left another story, you scratched the surface and then you let it go. I thought that was something they could have built more. I want to see more of that. Did a team make certain adjustments? You'll see a lot of times in basketball stories that a team was struggling defensively. They were leaving wide open shots. The team was nailing it from three-point range, and so the other team shifted into a man-to-man defense, changed up their game plan. And now all of a sudden they weren't hitting threes anymore. You need to note that. What happened? How did you stop them from hitting the threes? And they'll talk about the defense they shifted into. Okay? And then again, what happens next? One team going to postseason, one team done. Where are we going from here? Okay? Do describe key plays. Keep track of those. One way to do this is, as a key play happens, like in baseball, if you're keeping a scorebook, circle a play. One thing that happens a lot is we get really focused on the big scoring play, the big home run, or the big touchdown pass, or things like that. Well, what about the defensive back who had a chance at an interception on second and 10, and he dropped the ball? And then on 3rd and 10, we threw an 80-yard touchdown pass. Or in baseball, the runner who got himself in a scoring position, he was on first base, and the right fielder caught the ball and looked up into the stands and just lost the ball back in, and the first guy on first base tagged and went to second base. Got himself in a scoring position, and then the single scored it, where he should be on third. He just scored because he was paying attention and because he was aggressive on the base paths. Those little things that the typical fan may not notice, you as a sports writer, you as a sports reporter, you need to be thinking about that, because that adds another layer to the story. Okay? Yeah, this little anecdote I give you here. When I was the sports information director here, we were playing Truman, and they hit a three-pointer. It was very, very clear they hit a three-pointer. I mean, from my seat at the scores table, I'm watching across. He was a good foot behind the three-point line, and he drained a three-pointer, but the referees never raised their arms. Well, if the referee doesn't give you the signal, you can't mark it that way. You have to count it to 2. Their fans went nuts, and this was before we were broadcasting. Their fans went crazy. were all over us. After the game, accosted me in the hallway and got all over me. And I'm not the official score. I'm just doing the statistics, saying yes, he did. The referee did get the signal. Yes, he did get the signal. And you just cost us the ball game because we ended up winning by 1. I couldn't sleep that night. I was so upset, thinking, did he signal it and I missed it? Should I have said something to tape? Because we called him over and he said, no, I didn't signal it. Watched the game tape the next day. Guy's clearly a foot behind the three-point line. Referee never gave the signal. Had to give it to. That is something as a sports reporter that, you can say this game was not without controversy and bring that up. Statistics, don't get carried away, don't get crazy talking about it, but do, if there is a particularly meaningful or eventful thing that happened, bring it up. If a defense is not allowed a 100-yard rusher all season and your guy goes for 150, yes, that is worth noting. A middle hitter in volleyball who has 8 solo blocks, which is unheard of, that is worth noting, okay? But otherwise, just get your statistics at the end of the story. Talk about their overall stats at the end of your story, because that way, if you run out of time or you run out of space, that can be cut, okay? It's more important over the scoring drives, the key plays in the game than the actual numbers, the actual statistics, okay? Quotes, we want to have quotes, guys. I heard a reporter one time make a comment, you always hear there's no such thing as a dumb question. Well, that's not necessarily true. There are some pretty dumb questions to get asked. How'd you feel out there? What do you mean, how'd I feel out there? What does that have to do with anything? Okay? But there may be a question that you need to ask that you, as a sports reporter and somebody who's really invested in sports, Pete Carroll, would you have gone back and tried to hand the ball to Marshawn Lynch and have him dive in from the one instead of trying to have Russell Wilson throw that pass that the Patriots picked off and he lost the Super Bowl? You know probably what he's going to say. If I had hindsight, knowing 2020, knowing the outcome, yeah, to get up to Marshawn Lynch, I had a timeout. We'd seen if he could punch it in from the one. If he didn't get it in, we'd call the timeout, we'd run the next play. I know what his answer would be. Your audience wants to hear it from Pete. Okay, so go ahead and ask that question. Get the good quotes, and then think about what were the best quotes. What did they say that was most meaningful? Okay. Again, know the language. Don't write first baseman went 4 for 5. Reader can look at the box score. What kind of hits did he get? He came within a home run of the cycle, or something along those lines. All right. This is what I'm talking about. Use vivid language and active verbs. The center swatted the ball into the 5th row. The race car driver sped through the hole. The tennis star dove to her right to return the volley. If I'm saying this with adjectives and adverbs, I might say something about the center violently blocked the ball into the 5th row. The race car driver drove quickly through the hole. The tennis star ranged far to her right. Things like that start expanding it. But if you say these active verbs, use this vivid language, then you can make your point more exciting and with less time. Okay? And then finally, like I said earlier, mix some longer and shorter sentences. Short sentences add impact. It was game on. I read that. It was game on. Oh, okay, something big's about to happen. They're about to tell me something exciting, some drama to this. There's 2 kinds of story structures we talk about a lot in sports reporting. One is the inverted pyramid, the other is the diamond structure. What do you guys know about the inverted pyramid? You probably haven't heard about the diamond structure. What's the inverted pyramid? Looks like this. Remember from right across the median? You can see the wheels churning. The inverted pyramid is the structure we typically write in when it's a news story, when we have to give just the facts, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. So if we're covering an event, if you're writing about an event, you're probably going to write in the inverted pyramid. Got its start during the Civil War, when the enemy was trying to cut telegraph lines, and so they would get the most important information out first before the lines got cut. Okay? It's where you're really going to have a good lead. You're going to get your who, what, when, where, why, and how in there. So you get the result of the game. So you get the final score, who was playing, where they were playing, all of that. You get that up front, and then you start working your way down to less important information. Again, this is where your statistics go at the end, because if we need to cut them, we can cut them. Okay. The downside to an inverted pyramid story is you don't build any drama. You're just stating right up front what happened, and then going from there. Diamond structure is a little bit different. Okay. Yeah. Diamond structure does build the drama. So where the inverted pyramid story is not really building to any point, they're giving you all the information up front. The diamond structure becomes more detailed and more entertaining. Okay, it's more interesting paragraph by paragraph. You're building it out. So you start with your lead, what's happening in the present or in the immediate past, and then it jumps to the distant past, and then you start working the straight line chronology, and then back to the recent past, back to the present. So it looks something like this, okay? So my lead, I may be talking about, a player making a comeback. So I might be talking about when Danny Duffy comes back, for example. He's got the strained oblique right now, he's not able to pitch. The Royals may be struggling at that point when he does get to come back, so I may talk about that he's coming back into the game. I might talk about, remember what happened to him, his rehab starts, all of that. Then I get into the impact that he's going to have on the team, his leadership being back in, how he's helped keep everybody going and kind of been a leader for the young pitchers they have. And then I get into the body of this game and when he came back. And then he throws a perfect game in his comeback. And then I start bringing it back down in the inverted pyramid to talk about this specific game. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So if I'm using the inverted pyramid, typically I'm going to do that for a daily newspaper, one that's going to be reporting every single day with a game that's been played in the previous 24 hours, so it just happened. If I've got very short space or very little time, because it's concise, you know, I'm really having to get this out quickly. No historical nature of the article, just a news-oriented piece. That's when I'm going to use the inverted pyramid. Diamond structure is if I'm going to be working for a magazine or broadcast, because magazine stories are much, much longer. Okay. It's not specifically about a game story. So like the example I gave you with Danny Duffy, you probably have the game story covered, but then you'd be talking about his comeback, what he did, his training methods, how he got healthy again, the impact he has on the team as a leader, as either a sidebar or as a longer feature piece about Danny Duffy. And then we're going to, this is going to be a day or two after he's thrown the perfect game, really building that story up a little bit more, talking about his comeback and stuff. Okay. It does have a historical segment. Space isn't a factor. I can write this longer. I want it to be longer, but it's clearly a feature. More instead of just a event story, this is going to be an evergreen story that people can go back and read and feel good about. It's not just talking about one particular game. Okay. Questions? All right, so your event story this obviously covering the event is why most sports reporters go into the business. They go, I'm going to get to write some features, I'm going to get to do some cool interviews, but I want to go cover games. I want to go to the event and write and see the event and write about the game. Okay. Columns, the features, and all that, they're fun to write, they're very enjoyable. I got into PR instead of sports writing because I wanted to write more of that than doing the games. And it turned out as I got into the field more, I was doing more game stories and features and columns, so that's why I'm a professor now. But this is really what you're getting into, okay? So here are your specifics of what you need to be looking at and doing this story. And then on the next pages, There's your rubric, so you know what I'm looking for. You have two options. One is a football game, one is a basketball game, okay? So this tells you the what, the where, and the when. Your notes, the who is the Cocoa Panthers and the Tallahassee Goodby Spartans. So it's a high school football championship game. You get the scoring plays, you get some quotes, you get some information like Bell was a sophomore and missed field goals of 34, 27, 4, and 42. That should be 14. 4-yard field goal would be really short. He barely hit his extra point. You see the final score that it went into overtime. Okay, so you have some details there. And then you have their stats. If you don't know how to read these, this means he rushed the ball 11 times for 35 yards. Okay, he completed 20 of 35 passes with 4 interceptions, 218 yards. You'll know if he had a touchdown pass because that will be up here in the scoring summary. Okay. Receivers, he had 7 receptions for 82 yards. Talks about the interceptions. That should be there. E.J. Johnson had 3 interceptions for 100, and he returned 132 yards. Okay. And then it even gives you the play-by-play from overtime, what they did. All right. Or option 2 is a basketball game. It tells you the what, the where, the when. Is the Austin P Governors versus the Eastern Illinois Panthers. Is women's basketball championship. Again, you get some of the tidbits from the game, some of the key points from the game. You get some quotes. You get the individual box scores, and then you get the play-by-play from the first and second overtimes. Okay. The key thing I want you to remember with this, you do not have to use all of the data. You don't have to use all of the quotes. You do not have to use all of the notes that are included for either story. You don't want to go crazy with all of the statistics. All right? So don't try and cram all of it in there. Pick out what's the most important. Whatever you think the lead should be. Whatever you think the true story of this game is. The football game, for example, was a 7-6 game in overtime. So was it a great defensive game, or was it inept offense? You know, you had a kicker who missed 4 field goals. That would have been the game. They could have won the game right then and there. He hit an extra point to actually win the game. Barely. So was it a story of redemption for him? What was the key to the game? All right? That's what I'm after. Okay? You pick one. You don't have to do both. Okay? If you want to do both, I'll give you extra credit on the second one, but tell me which one you're doing for credit. Okay? All right. Let us take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about covering soccer and cross country.